these videos, break them up by speakers. And so you'll get this, you'll get a link to be able to download this, take a look at this list. And that's it. Any questions? I don't have any answers. We don't have a president here.
Second screen of stuff. Like the second screen of plans.
For my club, I make a PDF of all these slides, so the kids get to take home one of these and put it in their workbook. And you see that the videos, I have the link where the kids can look at it again if they want to. Been running that club for, I don't know, 15 years now. I started out in 4-H as a youth, about 12. It was a beekeeping club. And when we moved back to Utah after my service in the Air Force, I've been a firearms instructor for decades. And I went down to the 4-H office and said, I would like to start a youth shooting club. And so I got started, and then a couple of years later, the 4-H coordinator, I went into the extension office. The 4-H coordinator just looked around the room. Oh, I wish we could find somebody to start a beekeeping club. And about the third time that she did that, I figured out, all right, age well. So been running 2 clubs now.
Thank you, Blaine. Appreciate that. We'll take a few minutes now and we'll set up for our panel discussion. That's what we call it. We'll just basically have our board members come up. We'll clear a little bit of space and we'll just discuss. We'll just have people propose things to discuss, either questions, issues, whatever it is. We've got about a half hour before our next scheduled break. If we get this taken care of today to our satisfaction, then we might end a little bit earlier tomorrow. If it carries on as long as we want, we can always resume tomorrow if we would like to. So let's take about a 5-minute break. We'll set things up and then we'll carry on with that.
Involve law enforcement or anything like that, and I'm really proud of that. I think it speaks to just the relationship the program has with the beekeepers, and I want to keep it that way.
Thank you.
I was gonna say, well, if we're able to deal with most of them eventually, I guess that's not a problem. It's kind of a non-problem, I guess. And maybe the whatever legislation we do is that instead of actually destroying the hive, that it has to be dealt with, either treatment that's approved by the state or destruction. I don't know, something like that.
I think that's a good point. The difficulty with laws is getting them right?
Well, and they're so hard to change, and then When you do get them.
Yeah, so we do want to make sure we move carefully on anything. And it's difficult to do on 1 week or two, sometimes it's a year or two notice, but I will say this, a continuing conversation I was having at lunchtime. I haven't thought a lot about the ramifications of mandatory destruction in bees. But it's not unprecedented in agriculture. There are upwards of 60 million laying hens that were destroyed this year because of bird flu, to prevent the spread of bird flu. There are cattle diseases that there's mandatory destruction of cattle. So the precedent is there, and the baseline idea that it works in preventing disease spread is certainly there. There were a couple of hints we had. Yes, sir.
I was thinking a go between, like, kind of a. Okay, along that same line, instead of maybe a law to automatically burn anything with foul brood, maybe give someone like a certain number of days, like 30 days or 15, however long it takes to treat it in whatever way, whatever other way they have in mind. And then if they don't do anything, come back and check and see if they cleared it up. And if they haven't cleared it up, then it requires that they burn it. That way they get a chance to do something, but if they don't do anything, then you're taking care of the problem one way or another.
Excellent, thank you.
Or another alternative to that is take the sting out of it a little bit. But perhaps the association would donate a nuke, a healthy nuke, to that person, whoever has to destroy the bees. Kind of thing of losing their full colony. You know, you're destroying the framework where those bees live, but if you say, well, we'll give you a healthy starter kit to reestablish your colony, that may be something that, you know, would take, again, the sting out of it.
Thank you. That is a really interesting idea. And when we get to the intersection between a private organization and a public law, the legislature is not going to write a law requiring us to do so, but we could volunteer to do so. Absolutely. I was suggested that I go through, and it's a great idea to make sure we introduce everybody one more time, just in case somebody wasn't here before. It's Mr. Glade Sessions, one of our board members. He's currently representing Sideliner Beekeepers on the board. Jared Taylor is our past president. Richard Homer is our president-elect. Joey and Jenna presented to us before, representatives from the State Department of Agriculture and Food. And then Sinead McSweeney is representing on the board, representing Backyard Beekeepers. So we thank them for their.
We're both commercial beekeepers.
Yeah, Jared and Richard are both commercial beekeepers. That's right. I'm Brian Stevenson. I'm the acting president right now, also commercial beekeeper.
Right. Since y'all know us now, let's get a show of hands. Who's new beekeepers this year or the last 2 years? Okay, what about from 2 to 5 years? 5 to 10? 10 or more. Okay, that's good. What backyard beekeepers and hobbyists do we have here?
Backyard.
Okay. What sideliners do we have here? Okay, what about our commercial guys? Okay, nice. We got a good variety too.
Yeah, it's actually really good mix. Thank you. That's very good to know. Any other thoughts on the issue of mandatory destruction?
This isn't on mandatory inspection. For the legislature on HSB 59.
We're always.
So you give us an update of where it stands and what your feelings about it.
I always figured we're about 75 years.
Okay, I'm gonna do another show of hands here really quickly. Who in this room
No.
is aware of Senate Bill 59 before the legislature this year? Okay, there's a handful. So what has occurred, and gotta decide how far back it goes. A year ago, a young lady approached her local legislator, Senator Mike Kennedy. Her family had recently moved to the state and they wanted to use a Warray hive design. They were told or discovered that there was some question as to whether that was a legal hive design or not. What's that? Warray hive design. Essentially a top bar design where the bees suspend the comb from each top bar. There are some significant differences in several top bar designs, but that's essentially the picture. Anyway, so they wanted to clear up what they perceived to be a gray area in our recognition of what a legal hive in the state of Utah. Currently, the law says that in the state of Utah, a beehive must be designed to have removable frames in order to make it, in order to allow access to all parts of the hive. So they approached Senator Kennedy. He reached out to a couple of groups. Unfortunately, he didn't reach out to the Beekeepers group. He talked to the Farm Bureau and some other people and didn't get a lot of interest. And so he went ahead and just wrote, they kind of got together and wrote a bill striking that provision from the Utah law, disallowing hive designs that don't have removable frames. That's about the point that we became aware of it. And again, like I said, there is a diversity of opinions among our group. I don't intend to speak for everyone. There are a significant number of people who have serious concerns with getting rid of the removable frame component of the law. There are good arguments that there are better or as good ways to determine health status. But there's none that are faster or easier. And that's kind of the argument that a lot of people say is that I can go out to my hive today and I can look at it and say, is it healthy? Is it not visually? Now that may not be quite as good as sending a lab sample in, but it's 2 months faster or something like that. Now, nothing in the Utah law prevents laboratory research. Anyway, so this is the issue that's there. The bill is moving through. It passed the Senate Agricultural Committee. It's in the Senate rewriting, but in going through, it's become altered a little bit with the lawyers writing and things, and the sponsor has become uncomfortable with the direction it's going. So the bill is currently on hold. And we're working with them to try to come up with language that preserves the ability to do an easy and quick health check, and yet allows or defines more clearly what's allowable in law. Doug, does that answer your question fully?
Yeah, that's where it stands today.
It's currently on hold in the Senate Writing Committee. Yep. Any other questions or thoughts on that? I don't want to be the only one who speaks on that.
Is there momentum behind it though? I mean, so it's not gonna go into law this year.
It could.
Unlikely, right? I mean, it's not even out of committee.
Correct. It would have to pass the rest of the Senate and then go to the House side and pass all the way through the House side. I think at this point, it's lost a little momentum, mostly because the sponsors have said, we are uncomfortable with this. We want to take some time. We're in agreement with that. We're wanting to participate with them in finding some language that satisfies all of our needs. Where are we at? Somebody had a question up there?
Yeah.
Where?
Bottom.
Oh, if there is an American foulbrood, does that mean the whole hive all boxes? Yeah, so that goes back to our previous question. So yes, if a hive is infected with American foulbrood, those spores infect the entirety of the hive. The wood inside, everything inside the box and all that. So bees and the bees, everything inside, right? Yeah.
So I'm interested in knowing, are there better ways to decontaminate all of your equipment? I mean, it's easy to change gloves and put your hive tool in the smoker, but how do you sterilize the smoker? And how do you sterilize, all the other equipment you're using and the steering wheel of your truck and the handle? I mean, everything. It just seems like a huge burden, and I think, I don't know, I think that's probably an obstacle for most of us.
So proper decontamination. I'll walk slowly coming up to the front so somebody can raise their hand and volunteer to answer this.
Clarifying question, we're talking about when there's a disease been discovered? Is this when there's a disease discovered, not just normal infections?
Yeah, a shot root pattern. You just finished looking at a hive and now you've got 15 other hives to look at, but you've got it probably on everything just touch.
I mean, I don't know what everybody else does, but I carry several hive tools in case I have to change tools and don't have the ability to do. And I wear nitrile gloves too that I change out. I pull off and change every time I change yards, or it could be changed anytime I discover something weird in a hive. But
But how many smokers can you keep around, or how?
Smokers aren't gonna be contaminated. This is, I don't use a smoker to decontaminate something, I use a torch. We have a torch that we light our smokers with, and I torch my tool.
But what I'm saying is this, every surface you touch.
So don't get in the truck until you sanitize.
Everything sterile, how do you do that? How do you?
But if you're wearing gloves in the bee yard, you're taking those gloves off. You're cleaning your hive tool before you start your next yard. So when you're talking about contamination and carrying it from yard to yard, if you're a clean person, you really won't have that problem. Now, if your bee suit's covered in honey and wax, maybe you need to clean yourself. You know, maybe take your clothes off, buy you a new suit, throw it to the washer, clean your truck. You know, we've worried about COVID for the last 2 or 3 years. You know, we're wiping everything down with bleach as it is. Do that to your trucks. I've been to people's bee yards and they have trash all over their yards. Clean up your bee yards. So your normal day-to-day stuff is what we need to do to prevent spread. When you're moving your boxes around, don't be moving hives that you are knowing have disease. In fact, part of the state law is that's prohibited to sell or move hives that are diseased.
Is 4 ounces of bleach and that?
That's great.
Good enough to kill spores.
They kill spores, Joey. Bleach, Clorox.
Yes.
We got a thumbs up on that, yeah.
Bleach wipes, always carry the Lysol bleach wipes with you. I always have them in my truck. I know Joey always has them on the steering wheel, on the dashboard, just bleach wipe everything.
Jenna makes me carry them too.
I'll give them to all the inspectors, always, it's just bleach wipes, and it does work.
That's exactly what I was gonna say, Lysol wipes in the hive kit.
Mhm.
I think that's good advice. I think, as I sit here and listen, I go over all the things that I don't do right. And I think the thing is, do what you can. Do what's practical. I mean, we can't take our truck through a truck wash between every yard necessarily. I don't go back to launder my coveralls and change them between every yard. So do what you can, do what you're willing to do. Anything is better than nothing, I think is a good way to go with that. Thank you.
Right. A lot of people are using leather gloves with the long sleeves on them. That's fine, but if you get those contaminated, what I used to do, I use the nitrile gloves now, but when I use those leather gloves, I would while wearing the gloves, pour alcohol on my gloves and wash my gloves in alcohol. And the magic thing about that is it makes the leather brittle, and now you can't use them. But after the alcohol is dry, you rub in some neat's foot oil or mineral oil, something like that, and that keeps it solid. And they're sterile.
I don't want to kick a dead horse, and obviously there's a lot of more discussion maybe tomorrow. But I guess the point of clarification is leading to the discussion maybe tomorrow. Is there a viable treatment for AFB currently? I didn't hear one, and so that's my question. I mean, if we have a viable way to rid spores and get that short of that, but you know, we lost the BYU research and all that line that went, and now we have a vaccine on the horizon, only as good as the queen for as long as she's alive and she's been vaccinated. But so unless I'm not listening, I'm not hearing a viable solution for AFB. So that's my question.
I'm gonna pass this microphone to either Joey or Janet to answer that question authoritatively. I will say, I remember a time we do wax rendering at our facility as well, and I remember when I was young that we would treat equipment that had been contaminated with American foul brood. Now, I think that involved boiling in lye water for 20 to 30 minutes for frames and for boxes.
Frames don't typically survive that process, but they can. The boxes more normally do, and they were returned to beekeepers to use. We haven't done that for a very long time. I know I've heard my dad say, and he's been a beekeeper for twice as long as I have. Twice as long as I've been alive almost, but he has said, and Mel maybe back us up too. There's a generation of beekeepers that will say the beekeepers that tried to heal the bees lost a lot more than one colony. If they just, the ones who got rid of it quick, eradicated it, we're a lot better off in the long run. But I'm personally not aware of a way to heal bees from American foulbrood.
Before I pass it on to Joey, you're gonna notice those American foulbrood more in your older hives. So rotate your equipment out, get rid of the old comb, those old frames. I know, yeah, frames are pricey, boxes are pricey, but it's a whole lot cheaper than a whole hive. But if you got frames, that are 10 years old, start a program that's switching those out. We don't mind fighting dead hives in the winter, because it gives us the opportunity to go through those dead hives, look at the frames. Hey, are these old? Do they need to be just recycled and thrown out? By the time you go through and clean up a frame in a box, the effort and time that you put into that, you could buy a new one for that same amount of time and put together and have new equipment that's going to last for another 10 or 15 years.
There are some excellent preventative treatments that will make it so that you don't get American foulbrood. Antibiotics can fulfill that role if hives are treated prophylactically in the presence of infection from nearby hives. You can prevent that. The vaccine, my reading of it is that it is preventative. To my knowledge, there is not any curative product on the market today.
Yeah, so once we start considering things like UV sterilization, irradiation, those are processes, not treatments, but processes that can destroy the spores. They're very costly. They are effective, but that's not going to work on a live colony. Like, you can't just send a whole live colony of bees and all through an irradiation chamber and expect it to come out unscathed at the other end, right? So yes, there's antibiotics which will suppress symptoms, but it will not get rid of the spores. Yes, there are processes that will get rid of the spores, but it's only great for empty equipment. So functionally, no, there was not really a effective one-stop shop treatment for American foulbrood.
Does that more fully answer your question? Thank you. Okay, what else? Yes, ma'am.
I was gonna ask a question about the same thing with the American foulbrood. Do you, so I'm a nurse and Clorox kills big different fields of spores, like some of the different. So when we're just talking about equipment, like if you were at the box to box or whatever, does Clorox kill the spores from that foulbrood on your equipment? Do we know of something that just affects like your equipment for the spores? Do you know what I mean? Like at the hospital, you can only clean, the only way to neutralize the spores or the C. difficile is to use Clorox. So I just wondered if.
What equipment are you referring to?
Like when you're talking about the box to box.
The hive itself?
No, not the itself.
The tool, so your tools are stainless steel. Yeah, you can wash those with Clorox.
But does that kill spores on it? What I'm asking, not everything kills spores, right? And so like, that's why I'm asking, do we know for sure that Clorox kills that spore on surfaces and things?
Everybody's like, I don't know.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
On hard, non-porous surfaces,
Right.
on non-porous surfaces like stainless steel, yes, it is highly effective. Like, okay, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But if you're going to be cleaning your hive tool, you're going to want to make sure that wax is off of it. And the easiest way is with a torch. Use a torch and a rag and wipe it clean. One of my boys' jobs, when we leave the yard, in fact, they do it because they want to play with fire. So it's taken care of really easily.
This question more for like your commercial, e-commercial guys, probably Jared. Maybe it's what Brian, but Jared, you mentioned one of the like standard operating procedures or best practices is to rotate out your old equipment, like your old frames specifically. What is each of yours? The way, how do you do it? Like, do you rotate that out by making nukes and just replacing those frames like every couple of years? I know that you're not a fan of nukes. I think you told me before. So I'm curious what your guys's, how do you rotate out? You just say, okay, I've got these frames. I guess there might be a couple different ways that you guys do it. That's what I'm curious about. Is how do you rotate your frames?
So my best way is when that hide's dead. You know, pick up that dead hide, bring it back to your house, to your shop, go through there and pull them out frame by frame. Do your dead hide inspections. How many are doing your dead hide inspections? What do you see in those hides? You see one, maybe one the hide died. Maybe you saw that one supersede. Well, now that you got every frame tore apart in that hide, what frames look like crap? Those are the ones we're throwing out. Why put it back in? Just junk it. I mean, you can mill them down, render them if you're set up for that. I've kind of done that before. I did it for like rendering the wax out of those frames that are now 10, 15 years old. That is worth the time for what they'll be able to wax and get out. Yeah, it's mostly going to be poppers at that point and some gum. And so to me, time is money. So when my hides are dead, that's a great time to go through that. If you're working hives in a yard, it's hard to have extra equipment with you. But if you come to something that's really bad, take care of the issue while you're there. Or if you're good at following up with making notes and coming back to that hive and saying, okay, this one had an issue, we gotta take care of it. Follow up and take care of it. But for me, best time to do that is when those hives are dead and get a good start on your spring stuff. And then we usually rotate our honey supers and the honey equipment into our group office from there.
So you're running all your honey with all these.
Most of them, yes.
Just as a side comment here. Jared's doing it when they died out. I'm in that boat of my hives are, I'm hitting that 8-9 year range, so I'm getting there. But I don't have very many dead outs. So it's kind of hard to do that. So what I do is in the spring, after winter, your bees have moved up. And I'm taking that bottom box that's almost empty and I'm pulling it off the hive and I'm looking through the frames and doing exactly what Jared's doing. This one looks good. This one looks like crap. Throw it out. So you don't have to wait for your hive to die. Do it when that box is empty, which typically happens in the spring. All of your bees have moved up, right? Go through that bottom box, and if those frames look yucky, chuck them, get rid of them.
Did that satisfy your curiosity there? Thank you. Excellent. Somebody else.
Okay, so I have a problem that probably most people don't encounter. But last year, October, we inherited a big branch of invading bees. People who had the branch knocked down in October, didn't want to kill the bees, they called us, so we hauled the thing home in our pickup truck. That wouldn't fit, it was quite large. And Jenna knows. She came out and looked at it. I'm just wondering how in the world do I get them out of that log into a regular box without destroying the log and probably destroying them too. And then again, this might be a non-broad problem because maybe they died out over the winter. I don't know
Has anybody tried to get a swarm out of a house without destroying a house along the way?
I. The difference of what you're talking about here is an established hive in a tree. And the only way to get that out is to tear it apart. You gotta get the queen out, or you're not gonna get them out. I had a swarm go into, there was a 2-story house and they had a. That ventilation duct on the outside from a bathroom pan. And they had somehow lost all of the little. Vent things that, so it was an open hole. And then top it off, on top of that, the little tube on the inside had come off. And the swarm had gone in there, so it was between the joists, between floors that were finished. And so, how do you get them out without tearing the ceiling apart, which is what you often have to do. But what I kind of found worked was I first took a shot back and I vacuumed up as many of the bees as I could. Stuck it in there, just sucked them up and put them into the shop, not the shop vac, but the bee vacuum. Shot back, I'll kill them. I've done that. But then I took a piece of screen and I formed a cone that I stapled on over that vent on the outside. But before I put it on, I took some that dunning stuff that the bees don't like, that they use to push perfume boards. And I shoved that in my hand in there as far as I could, and I just squirted like crazy, and the bees come boiling out, and they all came out. And they went out, and they came out of the little funnel that I made on the outside of the screen material. They came out and couldn't get back in. And then we dumped all the bees into a nuke box at the bottom and set it on a little table there. And then by the next morning, all the bees were in the nuke. But that's how I got them out between the house without tearing the house apart.
That's about as good a practical advice as you're gonna get right there. Congratulations.
You're talking about removing the old comb out and the frames. Are you throwing it all away, or are you just popping the foundation out and putting new foundation in on those older frames?
I'm throwing the whole frame away, because if that wax is almost black, that frame's probably 10+ years old. By the time you clean all that wax off that frame, you're looking at a good 30 minutes, and then boiling it for another 30 minutes. You're an hour into that frame. How long does it take somebody to build a new frame? You could buy a new frame built for
Foundation.
350. What's your time worth? Is an hour worth $3.50? That's not to me. But yeah, I usually just pull it out. If it doesn't need to be destroyed, I just throw it in the trash can. If I come across something that looks like it is these, it goes in the fire pit and gets burned that day.
I have had a box that got some wax moth in it, and I pushed frames out of those and put new ones in, but because they need to be waxed again, and I don't have the time to scrape it off and re-wax them, so it's just cheaper to throw another one in. But
Jared, I was gonna say, just be careful if you're throwing your stuff away. We had an issue down in Miller County, they threw a bunch of stuff in the dumpster and the bees all raw in the dumpster. So be careful just throwing it away, make sure it's bagging up or something.
Yeah, you use some common sense.
So that you
You
don't-
leave it open your driveway, you might have a whole swarm of bees in your driveway. Just robbing, and if you've got American foul brood, now everybody's got it too. So yes, be careful, but if you come across something that needs to be burned, burn it.
Okay, have we satisfied everybody's curiosity and solved all the problems we have?
So this is probably more the southern beekeepers. I know you're doing a lot more with Afghanized genetics starting to come into those areas. How are you doing with that? Because I also bring in a lot of bees, queens from other states, and I've been experiencing some less than friendly bees. How are you dealing with those genetics in your own apiaries?
Where are you bringing the bees from? Your queens.
We're doing California.
You have any southern?
Yeah, I'll wait for the mic.
You might be the southern expert here. I think the batteries might.
So down in Washington County, we do have Africanized bees. For the tests that we've sent in over the years,
I think the mic's off.
I think the battery died. We're working on replacing the battery. Sorry.
I'll just stand up and yell a lot louder. So, Washington County, we do have Africanized bees. We've had tests sent into the state. Our genetics do not show that Africanized gene on any of the things that we send in. Those samples that we send in were from the hives that we don't like to work, they're too mean. So options. You can kill the hive off completely. When we're breeding queens, we try to breed in areas where we have control of our drone population. We open me. Now, are we 100%? No. But if I have a mean hive, we're going to go into it. We're going to replace the queen. If that means bring in brood from another hive that we know is not mean. I do have the practice of bringing in new stock every year to help with our gene pool and be able to start with a fresh line that we use for our breeding purposes for our drones and our new eggs, turning those into queen. I've had some backlash on some people to kill Africanized bees or wild bees that they think are free bees. Well, instead of that turn, hey, I'm gonna go catch a free bees. Well, in Washington County, I don't think that's a good idea because that Africanized swarm may not be mean when you pick it up, but now you put that in your backyard. And if your daughter's like mine that's allergic to bees, she's in the hospital. Or your neighbor's in the hospital. Or you're buying somebody a new horse that was, like $50,000, $100,000 horse. So be careful with what you do. When you're working your hives, you should know how your hives act. If I go in a hive and I get 5 or 6 stings, hey, we're having a good day. If I get more than that and they're bouncing off my veil, now we've got to really look at that hive and see what's going on. I don't always take my first impression of that hive. I'll let it sit for a week. I'll come back to the hive. That hive keeps acting like that and it's chasing us out of the yard that we can't work. Yeah, it's going to die or something's going to happen to that hive and we're going to change out the genetics there. Does that answer your question?
It does. I was just curious because we ran into that problem and it's a number of queens from one supplier.
Yeah. I know when we've sold some packages, I've had a few complaints that your bees are awfully mean. I said, you know what, I'll replace that package. Just for my own reputation, I want to show people good bees, good packages. So we have replaced them over the years. We do question, well, what time of day were you working those bees? Oh, it was about 6 a.m. Yeah, that could be a problem. Was the wind blowing? Was there a honey flow on? I mean, there's a lot of issues that can make that hive mean that day. Do you have skunk problems? That could be a big issue. We had a yard that had a lot of skunk problems. It was hard to work that yard for about a month. I tried to get skunks under control. So.
Okay, anybody else waving at me? He said we can have some more time tomorrow. So we've got about 10 minutes at 3 o'clock. We'll start up again with Mike Brown. Thank you. Thanks to our panel.